Well, I can't say that, Shizuka's friends could have just destroyed this entire relationship, you know, and made things worse for Gin. I honestly think this could have been worse for Gin if, Gin just slipped up. If he was like, nah, Saika doesn't mean jack shit to me. Like it just sometimes happens. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you say shit you really don't mean. And so here Saya pushes the issue, and during a call, a video call with Gin while they're camping, at this cabin log site, and she pushes the issue and is like, "Look, what does Shizuka actually mean to you?" She really does put him on the spot because Shizuko's right there, Saya's right there, and then another friend is there. It's like there's more people there. And usually, like, a confession or something is done in a more private setting. And so, Gin did such a good job navigating through this situation. I thought he would probably break under pressure and be like, you know what? Yeah, we're not dating. She doesn't really mean much to me. She's just a friend. She doesn't really mean much. There were just so many different scenarios going in my head when I thought, damn, this is actually a more trickier situation than it lets off. It really is. And so here you can see just Shizuka is waiting very patiently for his answer. I mean, the die has been cast. The die has been cast. He's already put in a spot. It's like, fuck it. And so Gin here, he's just like a pro. I don't know how great of a, like, it just was so great to see him. He'd be like, obviously I'm going to butcher what he said, but he said something along the lines like, I'm a guy of solitude. I'm always by myself. I've always just strived by myself, and in my past relationships, I've made many mistakes. So I kept myself away from these relationships, and always just been on my own from there on. And so he says something along those lines, but then he says, though someone has infiltrated my solitude, someone has gone into my territory, and this person is like, I don't know if he said the word special, but he said, I have made an exception for this person. And within these times I spent with Shizuka, as he's explaining this, he was like, I found that she is irreplaceable. And bro, that was just smooth as fuck, man. That was like the smoothest shit I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, so he says, yeah, you must be good friends. He's over here like, yeah, you guys are good friends, man. And for you guys, no matter what I say, I just don't feel like I know my answer won't satisfy you guys. You were Shizuka. So yeah, I just think he did such a smooth job with his. This is not really a confession, but where he is at the moment. He's not really trying to rush things, but he's not trying to slow things down. But at the same time, he's like, yeah, me and being with Shizuka is just the most natural thing I do right now. I think this is probably the most wholesome, like, episode between Shizuka, Gin, and her friends. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're really seeing this relationship just blossom. Like, and for a lot of you guys, this might seem really slow paced, and I'm honestly surprised and shook that it is this slow pace because they've been alone together. You know what I'm saying? Gin has seen her pretty much in just in her underwear, and they've been on multiple trips by themselves, just the two of them, on different campsites. And so it was just so surprising to me that this is actually really slow paced. I thought Ginsan would have, sped up the process a little bit here due to the fact that he is an older gentleman. He is someone in his 30s. And even though he says he doesn't have any experience, that one date, is more than more that he was in a relationship, and that's more than what more people can say. Having a long-term relationship doesn't come by ever so often. It doesn't seem, it's not normal is what I'm trying to say. It's not as normal as what people think. Being in a long-term relationship is not as normal. There's 8 billion people, and only like maybe a billion or two get in actual long-term relationships where it's significant. and if it wasn't significant, you'd still learn a shitload. And so I think he's learned a lot within his last relationship, and that's why he was able to navigate around Shizuka and give a proper answer this time. You know what I'm saying? Hindsight 2020, you always want to play shit safe. You know, he's given it time. He's seeing how Shizuka is. He sees the type of people she hangs out around with. He sees, so he's learning more and more from him. And I get it. It's frustrating for her friends to just see, Shizuka be all over this guy, and yet this guy is really not confessed. So I can understand their frustration, but at the same time, you guys gotta understand, Gein's a grown ass man, and he's just doing shit. No, he's right. He says, I hardly have family or any friends. Actually, I avoided them because of past mistakes. So here goes. Here he goes. And so yeah, man, I think he did. Yeah, I think this pacing is actually pretty decent. I wish things would go a little bit faster due to the fact that they've been alone by themselves. But I feel like if they're gonna be together, from here on out, it's like, what's the rush? They already know they like each other. They're already beyond just being friends, in my opinion. And so taking it slower now that they know they have feelings for one another is actually probably the right step. It is in a step right direction. Unlike like Rent a Girlfriend, you know what I'm saying? That's always gonna be my one example, because it's like the perfect example of how the worst relationships is. Between Kazuya and Chizuru. Chizuru is always flip flopping like, oh, I don't know, I don't like him, just an associate. But then she's like has feelings for him later on, like, oh, like, you can just see in her face she does like him. But then she flip flops again. It's like that's like the worst way. But here they're not flip flopping anything. Gein actually wants to be around Shizuka, and Shizuka has feelings for Gein. So yeah, this was such a great episode, such an eye opener. He navigates this like a boss. Like, I honestly thought he did such a fantastic job navigating shit. And even though her friends pushing Gein to this point could have destroyed what they have built up, honestly, the risks were there, but the gains have been massive. Now Shizuka knows how Gein feels, and I think I think this is such a huge relief for her. Yeah. Giant risks, but huge fucking gains. I think this was a W episode. Really love the direction this is going. And honestly, like, if you think about it, if they did get in a relationship sooner than later, it would honestly destroy any tension between them, and it wouldn't even be that interesting anymore. And when you see a married couple together, they just act all like normal and shit. You don't really think much about it. But when you see guys just getting to know each other, that moment, the honeymoon period, is just one of the best experiences ever, and it just creates more tension and more. It just creates more, honestly.